Shovel Knight is IGN's Game of the Month because it combines great design and a whole lot of heart. It's beautiful to listen to and to see. It's a thrill to play. It has tremendous replayability.
Shovel Knight is an old school style, old school inspired action platformer in the NES style.
It's a 2D side-scrolling game with all these different weapons and these charming characters and a big overworld and lots of levels, and it's a really challenging retro-style action game.
And it comes from Yacht Club Games, and this is Yacht Club's very first project. You might not know Yacht Club, but you do know WayForward, and some of the guys that worked at WayForward, which is another old school inspired developer, went to Yacht Club, so this is in their pedigree, this is their blood.
A lot of old school throwback games are designed to emulate the style, the look of old games, to tug at your nostalgia strings. So Shovel Knight does some of that, but it goes much farther.
Shovel Knight is classically inspired by 8-bit games, but it has its own soul.
I think old school throwbacks are the zeitgeist right now. Everyone's doing old school throwbacks, but a lot of them don't have the heart and soul of what inspired them. So you see a lot of these games with pixel graphics or with kind of grueling side-scrolling difficulty, but Shovel Knight nails it because it feels and looks like a game that really was on the NES.
It's informed by decades of really wonderful game design. Shovel Knight borrows from the best of several old games, but it's also informed by the sensitivities and desires of people playing newer games, and it draws from those as well. The key to what works best in Shovel Knight is the extraordinary care and detail taken in the level design. Every chunk of Shovel Knight, not just every stage, but each little part of a stage is its own broken down lesson or puzzle or obstacle. And you make your way through those a few screens at a time. There's one specific thing you're going to pick up and learn that's going to be useful later.
Shovel Knight unabashedly borrows from many classic NES games, and the key word is classic because it's not just taking from just any NES game, it's taking from really the best NES games. So there's a lot of DuckTales in there, there's a lot of Zelda 2, Mega Man 2, the music, some of it's inspired by Castlevania, you're going to see some Faxanadu in there, and other things, I mean even Ninja Gaiden. But what it does is it really artfully borrows the things that worked from some of these games. For instance, the overworld from Super Mario Bros. 3, the kind of sub-weapon system from Ninja Gaiden or Castlevania, and just kind of nestles them into its own game. So it doesn't feel derivative at all. It just takes these parts that work, put them together in a unique sort of way to make its own special kind of game.
Shovel Knight takes a lot of inspiration from new games and new design conventions. It's very much the kind of game you would play if they never stopped making 2D action games for the past 30 years. It's you can see elements of Dark Souls in it. It's got elements of Mega Man. It fuses these ideas in a game that makes it feel like its own thing too. It's not just, you know, X plus Y equals Z. It's a really interesting, thoughtful, smart platformer that draws from here and there, but ultimately has enough character to become its own thing.
In this time in gaming when we try to look back and we have a lot of pixelated graphics and we have some old school ideas with difficulty, for instance, Shovel Knight melds all of these ideas together into something that's authentic. It feels like something you would have walked into Toys R Us in 1990 and seen on the shelf and picked up and put into your NES. It's not just inspired by those times, it lives and breathes to those times. And so that's what makes Shovel Knight such a unique game, not only amongst its you know, AAA $1 million budget contemporaries, but you know, in its own indie space as well.
Shovel Knight is IGN's Game of the Month because 6 months into this new console generation where we're expecting innovative new gameplay options and gorgeous graphics and all these incredible online systems, we have a very simple, very effective, very well thoughtfully designed action game that harkens back to the old school design that got us excited about video games in the first place. This is the kind of game that makes you fall in love with games.
Shovel Knight's charm is drawn from the old school, but it's not necessarily just inspired by the old school, it feels like something old school with that special music, those special graphics, and that special gameplay. It's arguably 2014's best game.